Hello, my name is Ina. I'm a Final Fantasy 14 player since 1.0, and I keep a good watch on Preacher's journey to Final Fantasy, since he is one of the people I really look forward to hear what he thinks. He finished the base game of ARR and Reborn. He still has to go through the patches, but he finished just the base game. And I'm very interested in hearing what his thoughts are. I actually saw in the description he also spent a lot of time in the God Saucer. I have no idea what it is with all the WoW players who spend an incredible amount of time in the area for minigames. I mean, I understand that WoW doesn't have something quite like that, but it's kind of noticeable that every WoW player flocks to the God Saucer. Well, anyway, let's see what he has to say.
ARR Reborn 2.0 is complete. I really want to talk about that. Not only that, but we got to see a first taste of what raiding looks like in Final Fantasy, just a little taster, and I found the golden carousel. And as a World of Warcraft fan, it made me so goddamn depressed. Let's go. So here we are with lots of things being rounded up in the level 50 Realm Reborn area. Let's start with the Black Mage questline. This was not as good as the first one. I loved the six brothers. I thought they were really fun. Again, surprising because they were Lalafels, and obviously my inclination coming into Final Fantasy was that they were going to just absolutely destroy my mind. But I
actually have to say the Black Mage quest doesn't matter in which. I mean, I really like the initial one with the 6 Lalafels. But in general, I find the Black Mage stories, they are okay, but not as memorable as other class stories, actually.
Ended up loving that Black Mage questline. This one, not as much. It was fine. It gave a bit more backstory and history and kind of concluded with the same conclusion that we had with the 6 brothers, the same sort of setting, the same sort of demon. But ultimately, it gave me a lot more spells. And this is where I'm definitely at odds with some of you reading through the comments. A lot of you were like, Black Mage leveling is the worst thing ever. It's spoiling it. You should swap to something else. You should try a different job. And I would say one of the most frequently asked questions I've had over the last 10 levels or so since we did our Day 4 video is, what other jobs are you going to try? And people were surprised to be saying, nothing. I'm really happy with what we're doing right now. People are like, what? No, it's terrible. It's really, really...
I mean, that's the thing. It's like, you can just play any job on your character, and if you find something that you really enjoy, like Black Mage, there's no real reason for you to switch it up, even if you're way overleveled. Though I guess you could say, considering he wants to play a caster, maybe something like Summoner might interest him later on. But he's kind of right in what he is about to say. I did watch a little bit ahead. He's very much right that if you enjoy it, you don't have to change it, really. Or you just change it later.
Bad. Here's the thing. From my perspective, I don't really still know, even to this day, what the other jobs do. So I have nothing to compare it against, right? So that's definitely...
But I hope at least he knows what the healers are doing.
I like really fast gameplay. We've talked about this several times while I've been streaming Final Fantasy, that as much as World of Warcraft has made so many mistakes recently in terms of its content, it's unrivaled in terms of its gameplay. And that's just... I consider that an objective fact, although some people would prefer the other side. In terms of responsiveness and interactivity,
I cannot really say anything about that since I never got past level 20, like the trial basically, so I have actually no idea what it feels like to play WoW.
Raid bosses last night, just before recording this, because we can, and I have my little Tuesday raid team that clears heroic in an hour, so they were like, should we do 3 mythic bosses? And it was very apparent to me that the gameplay is still king, and Final Fantasy suffers there, as do loads of other games. Like loads, an entire wealth of games that go along with it. So coming into Final Fantasy, obviously I've been made aware of the 2.5-second global cooldown. It's super slow, the gameplay is jank, you're basically playing a vanilla World of Warcraft experience, which is also pretty bad, because you're built around this endgame idea, but you're nowhere near endgame.
Is it really bad?
Been really, definitely a little awkward and almost a little obnoxious with Black Mage, is that because of the level syncing system, because you over-level the story rather quickly, right?
That's
so
true.
The story stuff will be level 43, but you might be level 47, which means you picked up several new abilities, and all those abilities alter how your character plays nearly entirely. And then suddenly you get thrown into
that doesn't apply
and they take those
to
away,
every job, but it certainly applies to a Black Mage.
So all the way through it, I got maybe 7 or 8 different complete playstyles to use with my Black Mage, depending on what I was doing. Now, honestly, that was kind of fun. It was kind of fun. It was a little obnoxious. It was a little like, I kind of wish I just, like, for example, I would just get a brand new spell that sounded really cool, like Flare, and I wouldn't be able to use it because the next mission involves you not being the level that you would appropriately get Flare. So you don't have it anymore. And you're like, oh, God, I like that.
And that's where New Game Plus comes in. You can actually use them. Yay!
In a world where the gameplay isn't particularly good, it kept that gameplay interesting. And as I've already said, having cast time, so I'm casting fires, I'm casting...
I'm actually surprised he went into Cutter's Cry. Cutter's Cry is an optional dungeon.
Which I think was a saving grace. If I would have been playing something else, I'm almost certain the global cooldown would have been more of a problem. I can't confirm that, but that's how I feel it would have gone. So although a lot of you have been like, you should try a different job, you should try a different
this
job.
particular boss,
realistically, let's say,
at the beginning of ARR and Reborn, was actually really difficult to deal with because of all the ads that boss is calling.
And now the gameplay has really picked up. So the conclusion to the Black Mage story did give me my final powers, which I think was Flare, for now, until I level into like the next expansion, so to speak. And it's been great. It's been absolutely fantastic. I had no worries about it. The story was a little weaker than the original half of the Black Mage story, but overall it's pretty good. We have finished the main story of ARR now. Let's talk about that a little bit, because it did lose me for a spell. One thing I really, really, truly commend Squeenix for here is utilizing the players and a raid group for the finale encounters. This was genius. This was absolutely genius. It made so much more sense to do this, is to like say, okay, now we're going to bump you up to actually like an 8-player, their version of raids, in order to get stuff done. I will have to commend the like nearly 10,000 people who were watching me do this, who all were in on the joke, and I was not in on the joke, of Cape Westwind, which apparently has become a running gag, certainly with streamers who are checking out Final Fantasy.
It is certainly a running gag, and for everyone who played Cape Westwind, I very much hope you will continue the tradition to hyping up this fight. However, there's a good chance that with potentially 7.0, these fights will no longer be done in a group, which particularly makes sense in the later parts.
I actually got to Cape Westwind and I was like, okay, I've been hearing about this for the last 7 hours, 7 hours of preparation leading to Cape Westwind. So I went up, I got a drink, I like stretched my legs, I let my dog out so I could come back for a full degenerate gaming session, and then smashed it to pieces. Are you guys trolling me, or did that, I don't know what happened?
Yes, you were trolled. Just a tiny little bit.
You were 100% trolling for like the last day? A whole day? I was like, why is everyone so building this up? You fucking dickheads, man. Oh, you absolute clowns. All I've had all day is literal fucking spam endlessly about this. But I got to commend the guys for putting down a ton of world markers and like saying everybody needs to stack A, stack B, and I was like, I'm not going to read a guide. I was like, guys, relax. I'm not going to read a guide. I want to learn it. I want to figure it out. That's how I am. And they were like, no, man, you're going to be here for like 4 hours. This is ridiculous. Make sure you take a really seasoned break.
It's always so fun to watch that for people that are not initiated yet.
And I do want to address here a lot of people getting a little bit upset or a little bit frustrated that I cleared this content very easily, knowing that I like hard content. And I think part of it is worrying that I'm going to be upset or laugh at the game in some way, because the final 3 raid groups that you do to finish the main story are very, very easy, and then being a little like, oh, he's gonna hate the game now. He's gonna not like it. And they're like, this is.
That seems kind of ridiculous. A, it is the base game, meaning it's 7 years old. Obviously, it's a lot easier today. I would like to point out, 7 years ago, you actually needed the entire 2 hours to get through the dungeon, because at that point you were lucky if you had eye level 70 gear. Because the best you had, most likely when you did the dungeon, was your artifact gear. And you didn't even have the upgrade yet for the artifact gear, because you had to grind that. It was a very, very, very difficult dungeon. On top of that, you had the cutscenes, and it really took a while. Especially, you really could mess it up with Ultima weapon. That was really, you were already potentially 1.5 hours in there. You basically were on Ultima weapon, and people would wipe there over and over and over, mostly to the lasers, and then people would leave because they started to get like really, really frustrated and getting tired. Today, that doesn't exist anymore, but there was a time where it really was difficult. But personally, I'm still glad that the dungeon is in there. However, I do hope at some point they will turn it into a single-player experience so that new players can go at their own pace, basically, and watch the cutscenes and still get to do the fights. It was a little bit of a challenge, but not as hard as it used to be, and that they also don't have to deal with other people who are just trying to run through it and cut every corner they can, So, but why would anyone hate that? Especially someone who's actually, whose job it is to stream, obviously they don't hate it.
This is LFR, this is not the hard stuff. I totally know that before I even get there, right? I think that's very clear that and I said this about Path of Exile, I said this about Final Fantasy, I've said this about World of Warcraft. Game developers in this type of environment do not want to make a story element that you are forced to go through hard. And some people really get at odds with that because, the story's really, really easy. It's supposed to be. It's absolutely supposed to be. It's supposed to give you a taste. It's supposed to show you what it's like. There'll be some people who really didn't like running around with 8 players, so they do it in a very simple way. I think a great idea as well is the dungeon roulette, which means that there's a constant influx of players to help out with that content, to help fledgling players get through that period of doing these raid trials instead of waiting for all fresh, brand new players and making extraordinary queue times. Putting that in is a great touch as well. So I don't want anybody to worry, I guess is what I'm saying, that I think the game is super piss easy because of the story mode. I think that's a crazy idea to have and to try to justify. The game gets harder because I do see some of our viewers going, wow, that was really easy. Like they were expecting some rock hard mythic style encounter to be in the story mode, which they personally would hate.
Exactly. I mean, it is a story. The story is there to be played by everyone. So if you really need hard content, there's something called Extreme, there's something called Savage and Ultimate and Fishing. So go over there. And you don't even have to deal with the story. But for the story, let the people just go through it and enjoy it. Nothing hard should be actually in there. Not that I didn't die yet. I do would like to point out there are some instances where the bosses can potentially kill you even in story mode.
Frankly, people would hate to have some ridiculously rock hard multiplayer. Single player, okay, fine, you can start to work over it a little bit. But in a multiplayer with strangers, no. That's when organized content has its place and has its purpose, and I love that too, but I don't expect that in the story mode. So that would be great. How do I feel about the conclusion to the story? Surprisingly, did not mind the Power Rangers Empire stuff. I had been building towards it towards the end. Gaius was Evil McEvilson, which is whatever. It's not an overly complex story by any means. It's a good story though. It did keep me going. I really enjoyed the inclusions of Sid towards the end. Even Alphinaud didn't did not annoy me that much. Like, people really disliked Alphonard, and he has a very whiny, pretentious voice that goes along with it, which he's supposed to have as a prince. His character is actually fine. Likeable, not really, but like his character was fine. Never really had a problem with that.
That's true.
The only place it lost me, I mentioned earlier, the story did lose me for a spell. For about a 3-minute period after you do complete the story and you go to see Heidelin again, you turn into sort of like a full anime swirly rainbow group of people that purify Thancred of his corruption, his mind control, whatever you want to call it. That I did not get what the hell was going on. That was like the only part, though. Realistically, the only part. Like, I can deal with some great...
I agree. This can be... It is more noticeable because he hasn't played yet the... He hasn't played yet the patches, so it is later explained a little bit better what happened to Tancred. He was basically possessed. So he wasn't really mind controlled or something like this. He was actually possessed by a different entity named Lahabrea. And why that is and how will be explained later on. That would be spoilerish.
A power in the form of Heidelin contacting you because you have the power of the Echo. That's great, but then at the end it was like everybody turns into a big unicorn of RGB lights and flies through Thancred. I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, I had no clue what was happening there. But that was literally the only moment it lost me, and I truly enjoyed that it gave a credits. And it made me so sour that when it comes to World of Warcraft, you don't have that sort of finale moment, especially now that all the expansions are mixed. Like, again, it reminds me so much of Garrisons in that they're so practical and not fun. And Blizzard always leans that way in terms of just raw practicality instead of just fun and silliness where it's appropriate and enhancing their experience. It's the same as I said about mounts with Final Fantasy XIV. A lot of them are immersion breaking, but it doesn't matter because they're so fun. It's fine because players just want to have fun. And I really felt this at this point. It's like, I can't play through like the vanilla World of Warcraft story in this kind of way with a
From the very little that I remember, when it comes to WoW's storytelling, which is pretty much nothing because I think it was the Panda World I did the trial in, I think. A lot of the stuff is just stored in a wall of text, and I do think WoW has a decent story, but maybe not so much in the game, but more like outside of the game. Like, you have other games and you have the books. This is stuff that Final Fantasy doesn't really have, because the entire story is contained within the game, with the exception of some short stories that we get once a year that are on the website to read. But in the end, I do think that WoW does concentrate on a different way of storytelling, while Final Fantasy is trying to present a story where you are the main character in. So to a point that you could play Final Fantasy XIV like a single-player game with the occasional multiplayer option. Well, if you're far enough in the game, you can technically play all dungeons on your own, either with trusts or with your NPCs from the grand companies. Though the only time, if you're far enough in the game, where you really have to play with people or random strangers is for the trials, for the 8-man content. Other than that, you're perfectly on your own and can therefore play Final Fantasy really like a Final Fantasy game, you know? And therefore the story has a lot more importance than in the case of WoW.
definitive endpoint where literal credits roll and we have a big finale to the story, and it's, you know, Ragnaros has been defeated, or whatever you want to call the end of Vanilla. If we go all the way to Icecrown, and it's like Kel'Thuzad and the Phylactery has been destroyed, we're free, we're doing whatever, you know, things like that. It doesn't have that moment, and it made me really sad. It made me really sad. It's like, oh, I just play through it to get the fastest levels possible. And that's where we are.
Now wait until he gets to Heaven's Ward. I mean, that's still a finale that gives me little goosebumps.
Well, a story being told. But I don't want to harp on about that too much. World of Warcraft knows it's got work to do with its story, and you guys are more than aware, if you play Final Fantasy XIV, that the story is such an integral part. Which is why I do want to address in the last video, I did say, like, if people really dislike this kind of storytelling, they should boost. And people got really upset with that. Look, man, in the circles I travel in, there are people who couldn't give two rats' asses about running backwards and forwards, because the story is good. Let's not pretend, though, it doesn't have a lot of faults. There's an enormous amount of storytelling, which is run backwards and forwards for about 30 to 40 minutes, just delivering messages, with a lot of dialogue in there. I know a lot of people who will not put up with that and just dislike the game for that and put it down. And that might be where I'm heading next after this Realm Reborn stuff, but we'll talk about that in a little while. Let's talk about the Golden Carousel. So the Golden Carousel was something I saw mentioned by a lot of people, not only in the YouTube comments, but in my Twitch stream, since day one has he found the Golden Carousel. And I hadn't found it. Until I entered the zone, into the desert, where I could see the Golden Carousel. I was like, oh, there it is. That's the Golden Carousel. I've heard about it. I didn't know what it was, which is great. No one spoiled it for me.
Golden Carousel. Didn't he play Final Fantasy VII?
You should go and see the Golden Carousel. I was like, okay, we'll go and check it out. Wow. Fantastic. That's a whole game in itself. And again, it made me a little sad. It's the same thing we've been begging for.
We have people in our free company that spend literally the entire game time in the goals also. Actually, we also have a lot of people in our free company that spend all day long crafting and gathering.
Putting the Dark Moon Fair next to it is an embarrassment. It's so fun. It has scoreboards, weekly scoreboards. It has a lottery going on, which people go and check. It was brimming with people. It has a huge variety of transmog. It has transmog competitions that are running in there. It has a pet. It's not a pet battle system. I forget the name of it, but it's one of the most involved RTS games I've seen in ages. It was crazy. Going through the tutorial was like exhausting to figure out like the entire mini game they've put in there. That's a full-on RTS with controllable units that you spawn from certain areas, and then you have...
Kind of wonder if he tried Mahjong. Now that is an involved game.
My initial impression, of course, was taken from World of Warcraft. It's like, oh, it's a pet battle thing. Because it does involve your companions / pets that you found along your journey. So I read it, and it was like, oh, use your companions to go into battle. And I was like, oh, it's pet battling? That's not for me. I don't want to do the Pokemon stuff. Wait, then that's when people are like, no, you have to go and see this thing. It's crazy. Turns out it's a full-on RTS with a battlefield and top-down view and controlling units and literally doing click drag boxes over enemies to get them where you want to go and all this kind of stuff. It was super involved. My best thing, though, was every 20 minutes they have a major event in the casino, which means that you do an event which is like jumping puzzles, chocobo racing, a huge event where you all stand on a huge disc, and whoever enters is in there, so you can have 100+ people on there, and then you just have to avoid falling debris and predict where to go, and if you win, you get a huge bunch of tokens, which then convert into special mounts and transmogs and things like that. Overall, the Golden Carousel is fantastic. Like, it was a full game in of itself, and I definitely had to drag myself away just to not stay there for so long. And again, made me really sad because it's something we've been asking for so long in World of Warcraft. It's like we should have this functionality, and it's another definite tick for Final Fantasy XIV. So overall, I'm still very much in love with this game. Like, very much excited for it. I haven't really touched the raiding yet. As much as the end of the main storyline in ARR gives you a little taster, it's not raiding. But what's been fantastic is the amount of people who definitely have boosted in the past and never got to do the 50 raids and don't really know what happens there, who are like, can we do it? And yes, we're absolutely going to do it. So that is where I am right now with Final Fantasy XIV, is getting ready to step into the raids, the first raids, before we start Heaven's Ward. There you have it, folks, and now the plan is pretty simple, right? I really want to jump into these level 50 raids, see what they're all about. Of course, there's been changes to the game. Won't be as hard as originally was, but I really want to check them out and see what's going on with it. I'm going to take a little break now and jump into New World for a few days, see what's going on with that. And then, after that little break from all the voice acting and all the expeditions in Final Fantasy, we're going to jump into the patch content. Had a lot of warnings about this. This is where a lot of people quit Final Fantasy 14. So I'm kind of interested to see exactly what it is that makes them so upset with the game at that point. A lot of people have warned me it's going to be a bit of a slog, it's not going to be that fun, and then we're going to get to Heaven's Ward.
I can tell you what the problem is. People just go through the story. However, one thing that people cannot, or one thing a lot of people forget, the entire story wasn't released in one go. Each patch was accompanied by raiding content. So if you're really someone who is like, I can't deal with all the story, you can still go by a patch approach, by basically just doing the quests for patch 2.1, for example, and then you do the raid that was also given to you. And another thing that also started at that point were the extreme trials. So you had a bunch of battle content actually released next to the story, but people nowadays just go, all right, I finished ARR and Reborn, let's go and do Crystal Tower, do the 3 extremes, and then do just the story. But there's a lot more battle content. There's like the entire Call of Bahamut to do. There are even more extreme trials. Every patch had an extreme trial. So you can keep yourself pretty busy. You do not have to go through the 12 hours of story trying to get to Heaven's Ward. And I think that's the other problem that a lot of people have. They are so, oh, I finally want to get to Heaven's Ward and all the great stuff, that they kind of just want to go. And it feels like it's never ending with all these patches. However, I would also say the people who took a little bit their time with the patches might be very much rewarded during Shadowbringers, since a lot of things happen in the ARR and Reborn patches that actually show up in Shadowbringers again. And there's also some topics that will dissolve in Shadowbringers that actually started in these patches. So yes, you can just rush through the story of the patch content, but you can also actually play like a patch cycle and just, do your 20 story quests and then go and kill Bahamut or something like this,
Which is apparently where it's all going to blow up, and it's going to be fantastic. So that is what's next up. Check out some New World, and also as a little teaser, on Saturday, Eve have been in contact with us, Eve Online. They want us to check out their game from this fresh player perspective. They have completely revamped their new player experience, and many people have a weird thought about Eve Online, that it's very technical, it's a spreadsheet type of game. So we're going to be jumping in and seeing if that's the case as well. So stay tuned for that video.
Alright, that's it. I'm glad he had fun. I'm glad he enjoyed it. I am glad he keeps going. I hope he also will have a lot of fun in New World. I also try to play New World, but every time I come home from work, the servers are so full that I'm like, alright, I guess I will sometime play next year, because I don't have the time to wait for the servers to let me in. Anyway, thanks for watching, and have a lovely day.